Good evening, everyone. In a most joy-filled and blessed solemnity of the Immaculate Conception to all of you. This is a special day for us, especially in the United States of America, because this is our patronal feast. So Our Lady of Guadalupe is the patroness of all the Americas, but Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception is the patroness of the United States. That's why the Basilica, the National Shrine in Washington, D.C., is named after her. And it is indeed a super big and very important feast. And the reason is really because today, with the Immaculate Conception, marks the definitive change, the definitive beginning of God's fulfillment of all his promises. So, from Adam and Eve, who we heard about in the first reading, up until today with the Immaculate Conception, after the fall of Adam and Eve, every single human being ever born was born into sin. And another way of saying that is every single human being born was born into death. So they were beginning life. Of course, we all love young life, and it's great seeing babies, and it's exciting. And yet there's this reality that looms over all of our heads, that one day we all will die. And the key acknowledgement is this, that God did not design it that way. That Adam and Eve were not supposed to die. When the Father says to Adam and Eve, do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, lest you will die. And then they eat from the tree, and then they don't just like keel over on the spot or something. You think, well, maybe God, he's just trying to scare them or something like that, and just throw out, something that would keep them from actually eating from the tree. No, he was serious, of course. And the reality is, no, they don't die like at that instant. But now they do die. The reason that you and I experience such pain at the moment of death, the death of a loved one, is because death was not supposed to happen. And it's no reflection of like our lack of hope or lack of faith or us being a bad Christian, anything like that. Jesus wept at the death of his friend, Lazarus. We don't like death, and it's because it wasn't supposed to happen. We weren't made for it. And so all throughout the Old Testament, God keeps promising all these things, and many of them keep getting fulfilled, but there must have always kind of been in the hearts and in the minds of all the major figures, the holy men and women of the Old Testament, I would imagine, a type of like bittersweetness. Because God's like, okay, here's the promised land, I made it for you, I'm going to clear out all the peoples that live there, the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Jebusites and all the ites, and I'm going to get rid of all of them, and it's a beautiful land prepared for you. Boom, you can go and dwell there. And they do, and it's wonderful. And then they die. Abraham died, Isaac dies, Jacob dies, Moses dies, King David dies, Solomon dies. Everyone, all the greats in the Old Testament die. They receive part of the promise, but it's almost bittersweet because they still can't beat the last enemy, death. Today is the ending of that. With the Immaculate Conception, for the first time since sin entered the world, a human being was conceived with no sin, which means a human being was conceived full only of life, with not a shadow of death. And that if she adheres to this great blessing which she has been given, she will never die. And indeed, that's what happens. We live in this church full of like relics everywhere. You can find any relic, Over in Europe, you can find tons of crazy relics. Like there's a church I pass by all the time that had the relic of the right foot of St. Mary Magdalene. And it was in a little foot-shaped reliquary in this church in Rome, because it was the first foot into the tomb after the resurrection. so it's a significant relic. Or you can go see, the head of St. Catherine of Siena up in Siena. Or you can see the forearm of St. Francis Xavier, because he baptized so many people. His forearm is on display in the Gesù, the Church of the Gesù in Rome. We love relics. We got relics everywhere. Who's the most important person aside from Jesus in the history of the world? Mary. How many relics of her do we have? 0. No relics. Why? Because we have none. Because she never died. She slipped seamlessly from life in this world into life in the next. And it was because she had no death in her. She had no sin. Today is the beginning of the real playing out of God's ultimate plan, not just for Mary, but for you and me. That the promise now is, if you adhere to me, I will do in you the same thing I did in Mary. You will never die ultimately. Perhaps for a time, yes, but not ultimately. That you actually can have life forever in me. Today is the beginning of the fulfillment of all the promises that God ever made. All of the figures in the Old Testament would have, done somersaults, would have rejoiced at today's feast. Because, oh my gosh, the thing I thought never was possible is actually happening. It might be the reason that there's the tradition that you put out the nativity set today on December 8th. Without Jesus, of course, because he comes at Christmas. But put it out today. Why? Because it's the beginning of the fulfillment of the full revelation of everything that God has ever promised. For you and I, if we have in our life something that we've really lost hope around, a part of our life where we think, I'm just going to have to live with this for forever. This is just never going to get any better. That I've just resigned myself to thinking that, nope, that's just a bad thing, and that bad thing will always be with me. Then today is our feast. Because the Immaculate Conception is the moment where the promise begins to get fulfilled for real. And God will fulfill all our desires. That we ought never give up any hope, that any desire we have for true goodness and happiness will not be fulfilled someday, hopefully here in this earth, but maybe not, perhaps not until our heavenly kingdom. And so on this great day, we give thanks to God for freeing us from sin, starting with the Immaculate Virgin Mary, giving you and I the same opportunity to be free from sin through baptism and confession. And we ask for the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, that in all things she might intercede for us and keep us faithful to the Heavenly Father so we can join her one day in eternity.